through all those years that now you think that you can talk about
Real world issues.
North American Free
Trade
Trade
Agreement.
Agreement, NAFTA. Okay,
I mean, yeah, because what made me want to choose it was like we see all this coverage about the renegotiations, but no one really knows like
oh, that's what I
why
do.
they're
Well,
negotiating.
what you ought to do is to start off telling about how this idea simply came to you, because what I'm going to do is
I am. That's how I'm gonna get into explaining
yeah,
like what
yeah.
NAFTA
And
is.
so
And
take 6 minutes, the first 6 minutes before we get into the nuts and bolts of it.
nuts and
The
bolts and nuts
first
and
couple
bolts
of
and
minutes,
nuts and
background, education, and experience. Now you make that, feel that out.
'Kay.
Because we've got 6 minutes to do that. And
Gotcha.
I'll introduce it by making a couple of comments in terms of how long you've been with us. You started with us at the age of 8. Were you 8?
It was 2014, or no, it was 2012, it was 2010, because Granny died 12/11/10. It's 2010. That was 8 years ago. Dang, I was 8.
That's what I thought.
Huh.
And your first topic was not slavery.
It was.
Your first topic had to do with, I had you on with Leo Lillard and
It was something about music.
no, I think it had to do with.
I remember we was on that couch.
Yeah, it was on the couch. It was because you talked about education, and Leo, that was the first time that you were with us. You came as part of a group. Yes, now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of their country. How does that sound? Okay. Is there any water around here anywhere?
Can I do my mic check?
Yeah.
Okay. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Good, cool.
Now, you got me on camera. Am I on camera 5 or camera 4? That was your first TV show, and I think since then you've got what, 8 years of TV shows behind you?
8 times 12.
Huh?
Yeah, but
You give it right. Let me take a sip of it. Okay, put it over there. All right. It's me. Okay, good. Watch it, watch it, watch it, watch it. Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. And of course, we have to talk about NAFTA, Alana McLaughlin. And Alana, let me welcome you to the show this morning and to tell our audience, not only in reference to this topic for today, but that this is about your 8th year with us. And I think I'm reminded that the first time that you came to us was back in 2010.
Yeah, 2010.
2010, and I can recall the first show that you did had to do with the protest movement in the South, and of course you've been with us continuously since that particular time, and I'm sure that many of our audience know you, but they might not know you as Alana now. You see, because over the years they've had an opportunity to see you with us, and so you've done quite well with us. And I think what I generally try to do when we talk about the topics for today is to offer disclaimers in reference to all of these topics to simply let the audience know that you selected all of these topics, and sometimes I had my reservations in reference to some of the topics, but you've been able to carry through with all of them since we've started. So let's start off by giving those who might know you some information in reference to you and your background, your education, and some of the things that you've been involved with over the last many, many years. Let's start it from that perspective.
Well, Dr. Haney, I'm a sophomore at the Nashville School of Arts, where my specialty is band and music, and I play trumpet for Pearl Cone's marching band, Pearl Cone High School. And a bit of background about me is that I'm very devoted in the communications and English, which is why this is the perfect thing for me. And I'm heavily involved in my church, John Wesley United Methodist, and I've been on many leadership retreats and all this, which helped build my character so that I can come talk to you. For example, the Junior National Young Leaders Conference in Washington, D.C., or the Summer Camp for Verbally and Mathematically Precocious Youth at Western Kentucky University.
And so you've had some experience outside of this show, and you've been able to, I think what you were in, you were in the first grade when you first came to us, and you're now in what, the 10th, 9th grade?
I'm in the 10th.
From the
I was about
9th
the
to
second, yeah.
The 10th grade, and so you've had quite a bit of experience in terms of your educational experiences over this time, as well as bringing the audience a large number of television shows that you've been on, and not only are you on the television shows, you're also on YouTube, Twitter, the internet. So you've got a great internet presence. And I say all of that simply to wonder why you decided to talk about the North American Free Trade Agreement between Canada, United States, and Mexico. Give us some information about you in reference to that, and then we'll talk about that this morning.
Well, in selecting a topic for the show, I try to go to real-world issues, and a real-world issue is definitely NAFTA, with President Trump trying to renegotiate and really terminate the NAFTA agreement, and we'll get more into that in the second segment. But it's something that's very prominent in our news today, and I wanted to explain what NAFTA is and what NAFTA does so that people can make their own opinions about it and really be aware of what's going on in today's society.
Now, this is an economic agreement. When did NAFTA come into existence, and what's the origin of this idea? Because I don't know that much in reference to it outside of just the really the common facts, but tell about the origin of it. How and why did it come into existence?
On January 1st of 1994, under the Clinton administration, Clinton signed off an agreement, the North American Free Trade Agreement, which commonly known as NAFTA. And NAFTA, the goal of NAFTA was to boost economic integration between the United States, Mexico, and Canada, and boost the economies of these three countries.
And so we're dealing with an organization that had special significance to all three countries and all three of these. And I think you mentioned at one time something about the European Union in reference to it. And so we're going to take our first commercial break within the next few seconds. And then we want you to come back and start talking about the European Union and some of your background information in reference to that. Because I think that this is an exciting topic, but it's a topic that not many young people, and we generally try to select topics that people your age would be concerned with, but not many young people are familiar with it. And so when we come back, we want you to start talking about it from that perspective. And of course, we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Yeah, just wind me down with the last minute. That'll be, yeah, because I was not sure what, I thought I might be getting out of there 3 minutes.
Yeah, I was like, I was nervous about talking. I was like, are we ending or
yeah,
just
yeah. So this is our 8-minute segment.
Oh.
And so when we come back, Alana, what aspect you want to talk about?
All right, so I'm gonna go back over what NAFTA is and Then I'm talking about what NAFTA does. And then I'm gonna compare it to the European Union.
Okay.
Because NAFTA's kind of like a bootleg EU with not as many benefits, and it was kind of molded after the EU, but like a bootleg version, like a Walmart EU. But I'm not gonna say that on TV.
So it's an 8-minute segment here, right?
Yup.
And so give me.
You could have 8:15 here. 8:15.
We got 8:15. Oh, 8 minutes 15 seconds.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
Cool.
Stand by.
Thank you and welcome back to the second segment of the show for this morning. We're talking to Alana McLaughlin, and she's giving us some information in reference to the North American Free Trade Agreement, the so-called NAFTA. And of course, Alana, you gave us some information during this first segment that was quite instrumental in terms of bringing us to this aspect of it. So let's give you an opportunity over the next 8 minutes to lay out for the audience some information and why this organization is important, not only to the United States, but also to Mexico and Canada, and to sort of examine some of the things in reference to that. Let's do it from that perspective.
Now, for our viewers just tuning in, we explained that in the last segment, NAFTA is the North American Free Trade Agreement, and it was established under the Clinton administration back in 1994, where the goal of NAFTA was to boost economic integration between the United States, Canada, and Mexico, and overall boost the economies of these countries. Now, for the last 24 years, or I'd say 23, because this started maybe last year, all was fine and well. Now, NAFTA does have some downfalls that we'll get into, but there are lots of winners from NAFTA. And everyone was fine and content with NAFTA, or at least mostly everyone, but we'll get into that. But President Trump recently started, well, in the last year, started these renegotiations of the rules and components of NAFTA, and is really pushing towards terminating NAFTA. Now, lots of Americans, this has been covered in the news, and I know of many people who are sitting like, what is NAFTA, and why does he want to get rid of it? You know, because unless you were unless you're 25 and older, or really 30 and older, you weren't born when it was established. So most people in my age range don't know what NAFTA is and don't really care, but here's why you should. NAFTA was a basic way of saying that, okay, hey, you know, the European Union has something that's similar, which was established after World War II for Europe, where a bunch of European countries come together, and if one goes to war, they all go to war, and there's no tariffs between those countries and all this, and they're trading and all this. It's a good thing. Now, North America wanted something similar to that, but not as similar. For example, one of the biggest differences is that you don't need a passport to travel between EU country to EU country, while you do need a passport. If I wanted to go to Canada or to Mexico, or if they wanted to come here, you do need a passport. That's a big difference. But NAFTA basically wanted to just boost the economy of these three countries. So some of the big winners in NAFTA would be large United States manufacturers. And a way that they're a big winner out of NAFTA, or they've been winners for the last 25 years, is basically these U.S. manufacturers take their buildings, take their big companies from the United States and plop them in Mexico. Now, this helps the United States because they pay Mexican citizens lower wages, which makes more money goes home with them. And this helps Mexican citizens by providing them with jobs. But one of the downfalls would also be that they're barely getting any pay, and jobs are being taken away from hardworking Americans, which is a big reason why a lot of people are anti-NAFTA, because they don't see the positives. They only pay attention to, well, 500,000 Americans have lost jobs under NAFTA, and so many people's companies, these big companies, these textile and apparel companies are up and moving to Mexico or Canada, and plus the imports from these countries are ruining businesses. So people are just automatically just anti-NAFTA, but it's helped the U.S. by making U.S. manufacturers more money. It's helped the Mexican economy because foreign investment soared in Mexico under NAFTA. And the U.S. has a really nice stronghold in Mexico, and U.S. companies are more comfortable with doing business in Mexico. So that's a pro for Mexico. And with Canada, all the trade and investment that they're getting, it's making them money. So everyone is making money, but there are lots of downfalls. For example, millions of Mexicans left Mexico under NAFTA to go to the U.S. to try to find better jobs and better opportunities, because the jobs that they had that are now moving country to country are losing money, or are losing its flair. So it honestly depends on how you see it and what level you are in the working field, because more blue-collar workers tend to be more anti-NAFTA, while more executives, like the people who are moving from the United States to Mexico, tend to be pro-NAFTA because, you know, they don't have to pay Mexican workers, and things that the U.S. are so heavy on, like labor unions and making sure that women can go on maternity leave and all that, Mexican citizens do care about that, but they have less of a say in it. So if, say, for instance, some apparel company left the U.S. and went to Mexico, they could force women to take pregnancy tests while applying for jobs, which was something that would not fly here in the U.S. Or they could pay them lower wages, something that also wouldn't fly in the U.S. The average pay of a company or a worker in Mexico a day is less than the minimum wage per hour in the United States. So that's a big plus. And plus, all these labor unions and all this are pretty anti-NAFTA, because there's 3 big states that were hit really hard by NAFTA by, you know, the loss of jobs. That would be Texas, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina. And if you go to what states voted Trump in this election, they voted Trump, and we'll get into that in the next segment.
And so in a real sense, NAFTA is an attempt to try to bring all of these 3 countries together. And I think you mentioned earlier, as we get ready for our second commercial break, I think you mentioned earlier that in many instances, the pay that is done in the United States is greater for American workers than the pay that is done in Mexico or Canada for the other indigenous laborers in that particular company. And so in a real sense, NAFTA has a tremendous advantage for the United States of America, but it's not as much perhaps for Mexico and Canada. Would that be a way of looking at that in terms of Americans come out ahead in terms of all of the trade negotiations that are?
It depends on your opinion of ahead, because Mexicans, when they see that foreign investment is soaring in their country, we're ahead of the U.S. Maybe they're making more money, but we have more investment. And the Canadians, their auto industry is booming under NAFTA. Now, they may feel like they're ahead because of that. It all depends on the way that you look at it. But from an average American standpoint, we're ahead in NAFTA.
In other words, all three countries, one way or the other, will benefit from NAFTA, and that is why it makes it important, and that is why I would imagine that you and others are arguing to continue NAFTA, because at least three countries gain some kind of benefit from certain aspects of it, and it would not be to the advantage of the United States. As a matter of fact, it appears that the United States might have a greater advantage than the other countries, but it might not be to the advantage of the United States of America to get out of that agreement. Yes. And so we're going to take our second commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break.
Talk about Trump's views on NAFTA.
Well, let's look at immigration. How would you?
I mean, what? Oh,
immigration in terms of immigrants coming to the United States and immigrant workers and.
I mean, okay. Do you want to talk about how that affects the U.S.?
Yeah, how it affects the United States and et cetera. You know, however you want to talk about it, because you've laid out all the basic ideas in reference to it.
So immigration.
So you want to say,
cool.
Well, do you think you can deal with it from that? What impact does immigration have on NAFTA, you see? Because
okay, I can do that.
Or if you don't want to talk about immigration on NAFTA, whatever.
I can do immigration.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Now, you ain't going to be able to talk about it for no 10 minutes.
I can talk about it for 10 minutes.
Huh?
I can talk about anything for 10 minutes, if you let me. It's going to get talked about for 10 minutes.
Okay,
Something's going to get talked about. Got it. Something's going to get talked about for 10 minutes.
Okay, so we've got 10 minutes for this last segment.
10 minutes. Is it exactly 10 or is it like 9:50?
9:55.
All right. That minus 5 seconds helps.
Okay.
All right.
Well, I'll introduce it and make some statements in reference to it to try to get us back.
You've heard me talk about anything for 10 minutes.
Yeah, okay.
I've done this. I done talk about stuff I don't even know about for 10 minutes.
Ready when you are.
Okay.
Let's get this over with. We're ready. Yeah. Let's get it.
Thank you and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. The topic is the North American Free Trade Agreement, and the guest is Alana McLaughlin, and she's given us some information in reference to NAFTA and some of the consequences, benefits, as well as the impact that it has had on the United States, Mexico, and Canada. So, Alana, over the last 10 minutes, let's look at this economic program in a real sense, and look at some of the winners and some of the losers and some of the things that you think are important, and why you think that the agreement should continue between the three component states.
Now, for our viewers just tuning in, we explained that NAFTA was basically an agreement, a trade agreement between the United States, Canada, and Mexico that basically tries to boost economic integration between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, and tries to boost the economies of these three countries. Now, under the Clinton administration, and even when Clinton was signing off on this, he basically told the people that, oh, this is going to create jobs, good-paying jobs for these hardworking Americans. It's going to bring jobs to the U.S., which it did in part. But over the last 24 years that we've been under NAFTA, over 500,000 jobs have been moved from the U.S. to Mexico and Canada for reasons like you can give them lower pay in Mexico and other things. You make more money when you give your workers lower pay, which is a big reason why lots of these jobs are moving to Mexico, which is another big reason why President Trump wants to renegotiate and terminate NAFTA. He's saying that this is taking away jobs from our hardworking people. So we're trying to bring these jobs back and we're trying to get rid of this. We don't need this anymore. And also, it needs to be revamped to accommodate internet commerce, which is something that, the American people weren't worried about in 1994. And it just needs to be touched up a bit to accompany all these new obstacles that have arisen in the last 25 years.
To really update it in a real sense, and it would be more advantageous to update it rather than to get rid of it.
Yes.
Is that the idea?
Yes, in my opinion, but there are lots of Americans who have lost their jobs under NAFTA and are pretty anti-NAFTA, and labor unions can be sometimes anti-NAFTA because of the fact that caring about your workers isn't really something that was really cared about, like as a topic and as an idea under NAFTA.
Into the agreement.
It wasn't really. And so, for instance, under NAFTA, lots of large U.S. manufacturers can make women take pregnancy tests before they can even work in a factory in Mexico, even despite being pregnant or anything, which is unlawful here in the U.S. You can't go to Campbell or Tyson and they make you take a pregnancy test before you apply. That just wouldn't fly here. So lots of labor unions are anti-NAFTA. And lots of the government is anti-NAFTA. But I will admit that this is something that's very important in today's society, and I just want our viewers to take what I'm saying and then make their own opinions about it, because I can't sit up and preach that, oh, we need it, or oh, we don't need it. I just can give out the facts and let people do their own thing with it. Now, President Trump and his followers are more anti-NAFTA than some Americans, and people who have lost their jobs will tend to be more anti-NAFTA, but more executives and less blue-collar type workers will be more pro-NAFTA because they're making more money. So these are just the basic facts of it. And another big thing is lots of Mexicans are anti-NAFTA because of the fact that lots of jobs in Mexico disappeared because lots of American jobs were coming over. Lots of U.S. manufacturers relocated to Mexico. So lots and lots, millions of Mexicans immigrated from Mexico to the U.S. in search of better jobs. And then this takes us to, okay, now these people are coming over to get better jobs, but it takes so long to get your citizenship papers, and it takes so long to become a U.S. citizen, and then you get deported, and then we all come back to the main idea of immigration. All roads lead to immigration. Whether it be NAFTA, whether it be anything in today's politics will somehow lead to immigration. And that's President Trump's big standpoint. I believe that another big reason why he wants to get rid of NAFTA is to cut off trade with Mexico and then build this wall. We don't need these people coming over. We don't need to be trading with them.
So you believe that if NAFTA is eliminated, that it would have a tremendous impact on Mexico, much more than on the United States of America? Is that, and that there might be some kind of economic incentive of eliminating NAFTA? Is that what you're saying?
I believe that everyone would lose something if NAFTA was to be eliminated. For instance, those large United States manufacturers who left the U.S. and went to Mexico would be losing money just like that. And the foreign investment that soared in Mexico until the recent recession would just plop back down to just stage one. And the stronghold that the U.S. has in Mexico and like the business industry would fail. And then the auto industry in Canada, which is booming under NAFTA, would just go back down. And all these winners that were winners under NAFTA would lose. And the losers would still be losing. Until we replace those 500,000 American jobs that were lost under NAFTA, cutting off NAFTA isn't going to do anything. We need to be bringing jobs back. But that's just a personal opinion.
Yeah, but in a real sense, Alana, and do you think that many people of your class, age, group are familiar with what goes on in NAFTA? And I know that this is one of the reasons that we wanted to talk about it, and you said that you wanted to talk about it. But is this a topic that is of some interest among people of your age?
It should be, because once people start working in these factory jobs, they're going to have to know about NAFTA, because if your job just ups and relocates to Mexico, you're going to be sitting confused and wondering why they're doing that. And learning about NAFTA and learning about the pros and cons of NAFTA helps bring an idea of what's going on in the world. And it helps bring an idea of why so many Americans are losing these jobs and why so many Mexicans are coming over and why Canada's booming. It helps explain lots and lots of things. But I do believe that NAFTA does have a lot of pros and cons. And I'm very neutral on the situation. I do believe that 500,000 Americans, shouldn't have lost those jobs. But I do believe that employing Mexicans and Mexican citizens over there is helping them, and it's helping their economy as well as our economy. So it's, for people to take it how they want to.
And so in a real sense, there's an economic benefit for all three of the states.
The countries, yeah.
There's an economic benefit for all three, but some gain more than others. And so when we talk about renegotiating the agreement, the idea it appears that the United States might be gaining much more than the other two countries, especially United States, Canada, and Mexico might be coming up short. And so these are the individuals that are coming from Mexico.
But also, lots of American businesses have been hurt by imports from Canada and Mexico, so it honestly depends on who you talk to. But if you learn the facts straight up and then take them how you want to, that's how you can really decide who's a winner and a loser. This is all opinion-based, honestly.
Well, now, what are some of the states in the United States that is more concerned with NAFTA than any of the others?
The three states that lost the most jobs under NAFTA would be Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Texas. And you see in the last election that once President Trump started addressing NAFTA and addressing these lost jobs, that these three states voted for him. And so those are just three big states that have just lost like thousands and thousands of jobs under NAFTA. And there are states that are pretty anti-NAFTA.
Very good. And of course, Alana, let me thank you for bringing by that information today. I must admit this disclaimer that I had in reference to whether or not we ought to talk about NAFTA, and as a matter of fact, whether or not there might be some interest in NAFTA. And I think that I can say that there has to be some interest not only among people of your age group, but among people of my age group. I think that I've learned quite a bit about the whole organization and the way that it works from the little conversation that we've had before. I think I've been aware of the agreement itself, but I never thought in terms of some of the things that you're saying that people of your age might wish to know about it. And so let me thank you, and let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you, and good morning.
You know, you see the results because in the last 3 years, 42 young men that I mentored to or been a father figure has been murdered in the streets of Nashville.
Oh,
42.
man.
That's unreal. That's unreal I mean, that's unreal by any standard. You know, that's not, I mean, that's, you know, and then like, you know, there's been 7 young people murdered this year. And I either knew the young person or I know their families. So 6 of the 7, I knew that. You know, so I mean, you know, that's an epidemic thing.
Let's see. If you could kind of have it out.
When last time you talked to Pastor Walker?
Yesterday.
Yesterday. Okay, good.
Let's check it out.
Kind of have it sideways.
Okay. How should it be?
Kind of like this. I got you. All right.
Here we go.
There you go. Man of the hour.
Get a mic check. Get a mic check for you.
1, 2. Mic check.
Yes, keep going.
1,
Count
2.
to 10.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Very good.
All right.
Youth violence, Brother Pastor Walker, to the ladies who were unable to make it, I understand. So we'll do youth violence and domestic violence. You know, I mean, as I was telling Brother Howard, it don't take women to talk about domestic violence. As a matter of fact, it's the men who are doing most of the domestic violence. The men are the ones who ought to be saying something about it.
In the primary sector countries, which are commonly called third world, most women are abused.
Abused. Hey, Pastor Walker, how you doing today? Good.
He's in there somehow.
So
One, two.
Yeah. Nashville, Tennessee, somewhere around town. I don't know. testing. Mic check 1, 2. Okay.
So, Brother Howard, what's your first name now?
Daryl.
Daryl Howard.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Daryl.
I ain't gonna tell you.
K. Walker.
Yeah.
Daryl Howard.
Not much, Pastor. You know what I'm saying? I stay working. You know. Only person I know work harder than me is you. Yeah, you stay moving. Yeah. Yeah, I know. Yeah, you ain't getting much sleep, I know.
I don't know if you can call it sleep.
Is it still raining out there?
Yeah,
Oh, man. I think we anticipate rain all day.
yeah.
Okay, Alana, you take care of everything. So we're going to call this youth violence and youth violence and domestic violence. Word violence twice, I guess. Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is youth violence in Music City. And we're fortunate to have with us to talk about youth violence in Music City, Pastor Kay Walker and Daryl Howard. And of course, Pastor Walker and Mr. Howard, let me welcome the two of you to the show this morning.
Good morning.
And to, I guess, talk about a topic, Pastor Walker, that the two of you know that we've talked about time and time again. Yeah. And no matter what we say about it, it doesn't seem to be getting any better. And I think it's good to have a show dealing with youth violence in Music City to point out how especially important this topic should be for people in Music City. And Pastor Walker, let's start off by having you to give us some information about your background, education, and some of your experiences. And Brother Daryl Howard will give us some information in reference to his background and a little information, and then by that time we should be through the first part of this show, and then during that next 8 and 10 minutes, we should come back and talk about youth violence in Music City, Nashville. Let's start off with you.
Well, good morning, Dr. Haney. Glad to be here once again. You know, we've been doing this for quite some time now.
Long time.
I'm excited. I'm just as excited as I was the first time.
I think we all are.
Yes.
Very good.
Oh, yes. And my name is Pastor Kelvin L. Walker, I'm a native Nashvilleian. Grew up here in Nashville, attended the public school system here in Nashville up until a point, you know, that I was one of those wayward youth, you know, and I think this topic fits, you know, perfectly today because I was one of those wayward youth that attended public schools up until a point where I actually got put out of all the school systems in the state, in the city of Nashville, Davidson County, Tennessee. Was not able to go back, went into the United States Navy at the young age of 17. This after having gotten involved in some trouble at the age of 15, I actually shot a guy, a younger guy myself. We were both young, and Judge Richard Jenkins thought it necessary, so fit that I would go into the military, that it would do me much better than it would if he would committed me to a juvenile institution at the time. Of course, I went in the military, and I was still a pretty hard character at that time too, and I stayed in there about 19 months in the Navy, got out. I did get out, honorably discharged and everything. Got out, went to OIC. I had a desire to become a fashion designer. And I went to OIC and got a GED through OIC, and from there, I went and did some studies at Tennessee State University. Then complete my time in Tennessee State University due to my drug addiction. That actually started, I started experimenting with drugs and drinking before I went into the military, but it just really kicked in when I got in the military, got around a lot of different people, different places, exposures to various drugs and stuff like that, traveling on board ship and stuff like that. And ended up incarcerated in the state prison system because I was a heroin addict, became a heroin addict, and of course, what goes along with that is robbing, stealing, and everything, you can in the streets, hustling and stuff. So I spent almost 5 years of my life in the state prison system, got out unreformed, and it was in August of 1986. I got out in 1981, but it was in August of 1986 that God reached into my life, snapped the 17-plus year drug addiction, called me into the ministry, and I've been in ministry ever since that time. It's been 31 years now, going on 32 this year.
Very good. And Howard, let's make some statements in reference to how you got here this morning. Some of you.
Okay, glad to be here, Dr. Haney. I appreciate the opportunity as always. I grew up in the Metro Public School systems. I graduated from Maplewood, third in my class. At the time, I was considered one of the best of the brightest. Went on to Tennessee State, but at that time, I was also caught up in drug culture. Not so much, using but selling. And after about 3 years, I kind of got frustrated with school. I moved on, and when I didn't have nothing to do, my time wasn't properly occupied, I just got caught full blown into that culture. In 1989, I was incarcerated in the penal system in Tennessee. I spent 2.5 years there. Got out, wasn't reformed, got right back into it, did more of the same. Caused a whole lot of havoc in the community, put a whole lot of destruction out here. And then in 2003, I caught another charge. By the grace of God, I didn't get what I probably deserved. And in 2004, I got out, reformed myself, became a minister, started working hard with young people. And I started this organization called Personal Interest in Changing Character. And our primary focus was to build, equip, and cultivate young people, men and women, and their families to be their best selves.
Very good. And so we've got some excellent information in terms of youth violence and what it is like to live in Music City, Nashville. I think the two of you both had opportunities to deal with some of the issues that we're dealing with. And so when we come back, Pastor Walker and Mr. Howard, what we want the two of you to do is to talk about the status of Nashville in terms of trying to deal with some of the issues. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. And we'll be able to get out of this for today.
All right.
And so we're calling this youth violence in Music City.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. And there is youth violence in
Plenty
Music
of
it.
City.
Most
You can't turn on your TV set. I mean, every morning, noon, or night.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you and welcome back to the second show today. We're talking to Pastor Walker and Daryl Howard, dealing with the issue of youth violence in Music City. And Pastor, I think we've already mentioned the fact that this is specifically Music City. We recognize that Music City is not the only place where youth violence occurs, but we also know that each time that we turn on our television on any morning in Music City, Nashville, we run into this issue of Music City. So let's talk about youth violence in Nashville.
Well, as you know, being a native Nashvilleian myself for these many years, that Nashville is really changing. I mean, it's changing, it's growing, it's becoming the it city, and not only is it growing, in terms of tourism and people moving in, and the housing, face of the housing market in places is changing, our neighborhoods are changing, communities are changing. And also there's an escalation in violence in the community throughout Nashville. And it's not so much as refined to any one particular location. You're finding that it's spreading all over. It used to be a time, you say, well, this is the high crime area, that's the high crime area. But now, with the expansion of Nashville, the growth of Nashville, crime is just everywhere. And a lot of that crime is being perpetrated by youth, young people. And amazingly enough, it might sound crazy, but youth violence is not a strange thing to me, because as a youth, a teenager, I was violent. I always carried a knife or I had a pistol, and didn't have a problem with using them either. So violence, being a youth, is not something strange. But what's problematic is such a widespread. But when I was coming up, it wasn't as many of us that had that, that
Mentality.
Twisted, that mentality.
That ready to fight at the drop of a hat.
Right,
okay.
It was it was a fist fight, and it's we all right and everything like that. But it was just a few. It's some of us, that we took it to the other extreme and stuff, and we actually caused physical harm to one another, stuff like that. But in today's culture, man, it's not like that, Dr. Haney. So much fear goes on around there. Somebody does something to a youth nowadays, the fear factor kicks in. So I got to do something to you before you do it to me. And a lot of people youth are serving long prison sentences, and it's fear-based because they're afraid that if they don't do something to this individual, that individual is going to do something to them. So what happens is you get a gun and you blow somebody's brains out, not even considering the consequences, the end result of all of that stuff. So as the city grows, the crime grows, and the ages of those that are committing these crimes are beginning to get lower and lower and lower. I mean, 12-year-olds and stuff out hijacking cars and stuff like that, and robbing people, and without even a slight realization what they're facing, if they're caught in this situation doing that.
Okay, and Howard, looking from your perspective, your organization is trying to do what in reference to this?
What we try to do is we try to intervene and prevent, the violence before it happened. But what is happening, especially these last 8 years, there has been more people been disenfranchised, poverty has grown, and within these communities, you know, like you want to spread out people all over the place. And then you have a devaluing of life. So when young people feel that, you know, their life is devalued, they have no value, so it's no problem to take a life. And that is really has just exploded, you know, how, you know, the like mindset of these young people who just feel without hope, lost, you know, disenfranchised, and they don't really know what to do. And there's such a anger factor due to the like lack of fathers being in the home, and like there's no like male role models to really like address that issue for them. So you know you got young boys who want to be men just out here all alone, and they just respond into situations instead of taking the time to think and react to what's going on in their lives.
And so in a real sense, much of this violence is violence that can be controlled. Perhaps if some of our youth had other occupations, more other, and I've always contended that one of the real problems in terms of violence is that most of the folks are fighting over money. Robbing and killing and et cetera. And they're fighting over money because they don't have an opportunity to have jobs. And I believe that if a person had to get up and work 8 hours a day, got a paycheck at the end of the week, then that would really decrease his opportunities to want to become involved in taking something from somebody else. Would you say that might be a perspective?
Oh, absolutely, Dr. Haney. Money is the common denominator for it all, to it all. You know, it's all about, you know, you go out there when people are disenfranchised, when they're pushed to the back, you're relegated to the second row, you know, and you don't have the things that you would like to have. Then you got a television set in front of you that you're looking at, and you're seeing what you could potentially have, and then you're looking at your reality and saying, I don't have it. And then here comes this other movie or this video showing, here's a way to get it. So now you venture out into the street culture and the drug culture and the hustling culture, and you're trying to get it that way. But it's all about getting that money. You know, people think that money is the catch-all to everything, and people are putting their lives on the line to get money and not realizing that they can get the money. And I didn't realize that you can get the money without endangering your life in the process, and I didn't know that.
They want quick money. Is that it, Brother Howard?
Yeah, that's it. We live in a society now where like young people, they live in microwave moments. You know, they just can't see that like over time. With you know, processing, you know, how you like get different opportunities, get a proper education, job training, you can like set yourself up to get all the things you want. But they can only see what's going on right now and what the struggle is right now, and they don't kind of see where like over time they can probably improve themselves and a lot in life.
Pastor, what would you say to some of the leaders, government leaders in the state and local levels? What would you say to them in order to encourage them to create more programs, more activities that would lead to better job opportunities? Start us off by that, and then we'll continue doing this.
I would first probably tell them to, you know, stop pretending like you don't know what's going on. Stop pretending like you don't know what the solutions are to a lot of these problems out here in terms of opportunities, in terms of how the government itself, state, local, and federal government have shut doors to opportunities for people to grow, for people to commune together and to excel. So I was telling them, you know, quit playing, quit pretending like you don't know. Stop pretending like you don't know what needs to be done, because you're the one that shut the community centers down. You're the one that cut out the summer jobs program and stuff that many of our youth were looking forward to at the end of the school year to get off into. They're the one that did it.
Okay, so what we'll do, we're going to take this second commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. With you, Brother Howard. Okay. And so you just start talking about what you think we need to talk about here now. And and bringing, you know, domestic violence, you know, treatment of women, and et cetera, and et cetera. But we got 10 minutes. And so when we come back, you take about the first 4 or 5 minutes of that. And then we want you to talk to the end. Okay? That'll be the next 5 minutes. Yeah, so, but this is excellent information. You know, every morning, you know, you turn from one station, somebody went out and tried to take
Yeah, it's like you don't say, let me turn the news on. You say, let me see who got killed last night.
There you go, because that's how prevalent it
Yeah,
is.
it is.
And I think you gave some statistical information earlier, Brother Howard, in reference to the number of, we'll deal with that information.
Okay.
I think you gave us some information in reference. You talked about that before
Okay.
we had that opportunity to put that on film here. But make some statements in reference to the prevalence of homicide and et cetera, as much as you could possibly give us. And then, talk about it from that perspective, how folks are killing one another. That's
Yes, sir.
You saw it, neighbor. Bring it.
Thank you, and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. The topic is youth violence in Music City, and we have with us to talk about youth violence in Music City, Pastor Kay Walker and Daryl Howard. And Brother Howard, let's see if we can give you an opportunity during the last 10 minutes that we have on this particular topic to talk about some of the things that you are doing in terms of trying to reach out to folks and give us some statistical information in reference to what you found dealing with violence and homicide and et cetera in this particular city.
What I've come to find out, I've been doing a juvenile ministry for the last 9 years at juvenile detention. Okay, we have kids 14 to 24. 1 in 4 are more likely to die from homicide than to just die from just natural causes. We have down there at the moment, you probably have maybe 15, 16 young people that are under 18 that are dealing with a homicide charge right now. So sometimes, they may spend the next 31 to 51 years of their life incarcerated. What has happened is it seems like society or the government has criminalized poverty and struggle. And you have young people who are in conditions that the only way that they can see out is to do something criminal, whether they sell drugs, robbing, or they doing whatever they got to do just to put food on the table. Just simple things, clothing, lights and water, just for some housing. And it's a real sad commentary because most of it is correctable. We always need people to mentor us. We need fathers in our lives. We also need proper opportunities, education, job training to help young people and the parents to better improve their life. Provide the resources that they need so they can become their best selves instead of just criminalize them, give them a felony record, and then they can't get nothing. They just left out here doing more struggle. And that's why they tend to go to the person who's outside, the guy who's selling the drugs or the guy who's robbing, because he's providing the opportunity for them to put money in their pocket. And though it seems, like madness, but when you don't have no hope, that's all you see. It's the madness and insanity.
And I think what you're calling the criminalizing poverty, is that what we're doing, Pastor Walker?
It's pretty much, and it's all by design. You create situations where people can't find employment. You put these roadblocks in the way. That was a time that you could actually go into the military without having a high school diploma. But they stopped that, they stopped that. And why? Why stop it? When you can take an individual in, you can provide training, you can provide discipline, and then you can also provide avenues for education, getting the GED, going on to a schooling and stuff like that while in the military and beyond, on the GI Bill. But you close that door, and I think one of the reasons why is because it had the school to prison pipeline had to be fully developed, and that the ability to go into the military, to drop out of high school, go into the military was a deterrent, was a roadblock, and it was a cog in the wheel of the school to prison pipeline. Because now, back then, see, when I was put out of this school system here in Tennessee, I was able to go into the military, and I had a recruiter that, Ms. Williams, that recruited me and brought me into the military and stuff like that. And at the age of 17, I was able to go in there. And then, of course, after I got out, I, pursued a GED and everything like that. But everything is designed, to put people in a position where there seems to be no hope. And then people are being poisoned through the music and the videos. You take the negative music and you put a visual with it, and now people are running around calling themselves thugs. When I was out there in the streets, we call ourselves, we were hustlers. Now
not a thug.
No, not a thug, because see, I'm a reformed hustler, but I still hustle, but my hustle is legal. My hustle is I'm hustling through working. I'm hustling through being an entrepreneur. So I still hustle, but you can't be a reform, you can't thug, you got to drop it. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? So, people around here, and they thinking that thug life is life, and it's not.
It's
thug
how people characterize themselves, that what makes them who they are.
Yeah.
You see, and when they call themselves thugs, or they become involved with what? A bunch of thugs, and you hang around with a bunch of
who
thugs,
they say they are.
then you start doing what? Thuggish kind of things.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
You see, that's the thug culture that you become a part of. And it's difficult to break that unless there's some kind of intervention. And so the two of you, I think, Brother Howard, you are also saying that there has to be somebody from outside that has somebody's got to start opening up community centers again.
Well, they got to open up community centers. They got to open up opportunities for young people. One thing that I have noticed that most young people may not want to go to college, right? But we work with Tennessee Applied Technology College, whatever it is, and we have found quite a few young people where we can get them into training programs, whether it's truck driving, welding, barber college, or just something where they can get a skill set where they be able to take care of themselves and their families. We also, I've been mentoring, some young people since they was 19, 20, and now they 31 now, because I'm always been that father figure or someone who they can call and count on and be supportive of them, because even in our walk in life, we need somebody to be there for us, just that listening ear, that sounding board, somebody to relate to who has been through that struggle and can tell you that it's better on the other side. You just got to just keep on, pushing through your obstacles.
And so in a real sense, it's a community kind of thing. And
yes, sir.
That people in Music City really can deal with youth violence and abuse. But there has to be recognition on the part, and I keep mentioning community centers and et cetera, because I think that it's through the community centers that all of that information that you're dealing with, Mr. Howard, that can be broadened and to capture a large number of folks. If we had one great community center in each neighborhood, you see, then I think that...
that's a great point, Dr. Haney. I remember growing up where when you can go to the community center, it opens up at 8 o'clock, closes up about 10:30, but you always knew where your kid was. Kid always had a place to go where it was structured. Now the community centers are geared towards middle-aged people like myself, and young people are kind of tossed out. And when you don't have a mature mind where you can do healthy, productive activities, then you tend to just follow the crowd and do what they do, and we know right now that's not too good.
And so it's leadership. Is that what we're talking about? It's people who seem to have to understand the importance of leadership, and people, and for our leaders now in the legislature and the council and et cetera, to start thinking in terms of how do we create opportunities, because the money is there and it's being spent one way or the other, and it's a matter of redirecting the funds here and there and et cetera.
Yes, sir.
And I just don't see why that should be a great problem.
Where the government doesn't care about creating opportunities and opening community centers, because the government, local and state governments, metro governments and things like that, they're the ones that's shutting it down, So they're not interested in creating these opportunities, It's going to have to come from the people. It's the people who are genuinely concerned about what our youth is going through, to create the opportunity.
Yes, sir.
This is something that we have to do, because the government's not going to do it. They've shown us time and time again, they'll come and talk a good game, but they're not going to do anything. They'll lead a whole army to the fight, but neither one of them going to throw a rock. You know what I'm saying? They stand there and grandstand and platform all the time, but they're not going to do anything. And we need to stop expecting them to.
Okay, and so let me thank the two of you during this last half minute that we have here, Pastor Walker and Darrell, for bringing that excellent information. And at least once again, we have an opportunity to remind people of what can be done if good people get together and try to do something. And so I think, and I appreciate the two of you bringing that information. And let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning. doing all right?
I'm doing
Dr.
good.
Pope? It's good
Doing
seeing you
good. Good to
today.
see you too.
Very good.
All right.
No, I think that's Brother Gregory Tate. Yeah, he'll show up.
Oh, I got it.
Okay. Yeah, that should be that 1 o'clock show.
It's good to see you, sir.
Hey, Dr. Pope, it's good seeing you still here.
Yes.
We're trying to do something.
All right.
Had a good show there to talk about youth violence in Music City.
Oh, is that right?
And talk about some of the problems.
All right, doctor, need a mic check from you. You can just count the names.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Oh, very good.
Okay. All right.
I like that.
Dashiki.
Dashiki, you have
All right. Well, thank you. Well, thank you. Thank you.
shows well, I'm telling you.
Uh-huh.
So we're talking about dreamers
And gun violence.
gun violence.
Right.
Okay, dreamers and gun violence. Do you mean the dreamers when you talk about the immigrant dreamers that we had? I mean that.
You mean the DACA recipients?
Yeah, Doctor.
Yes, yes.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Now, I'm a little confused. Is the president has offered a situation where he wants to give a path to citizenship? Is it 1.8 million or is it 2.8 million?
1 point.
It's 1.8 million.
Mic down.
Okay. All right then. 1.8 million. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna, yes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, all right. I'm gonna talk more about despair in terms of its connection to the school shootings.
Okay. Very
Okay?
Good. Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
exactly what we want to talk about. And thank you and welcome to the show this morning. We're talking to Dr. Cupid Poe. Dr. Poe, and who has been with us on many occasions, and I think that, Dr. Poe, you're no stranger to our audience, and I sort of stumble in terms of introducing you because I don't know where to start introducing you because you've been with us from almost the very, very beginning, and you've given us so many excellent shows, and we've not seen you over the last several months, but now, and we're just glad to have you back here with us one more time, and especially to talk about dreamers and gun violence. But before we get into the topic this morning, Dr. Poe, let's have you to give our audience some information in reference to your background, your education, some of your experiences, and then some of the things that, in a real sense, motivated you to come here to talk about violence and dreamers and all of those kinds of things that are current in today's discussion. First, let's start off by having you to talk about Dr. Cupid Poe, and to talk about your background, education, and some of your experiences. And then during that second segment, we'll get into dreamers and gun violence.
Okay. I was born in a small town near Orlando, Florida, called Eustis, Florida. Grew up in Sarasota, Florida. In 1956, I came to Tennessee State University and graduated in 1960, and then went on to Meharry Medical College and graduated there in 64. Did an internship in Chicago and was drafted out of my internship. Spent 2 years totally in the U.S. Army. Then eventually came back to Nashville, where I took a job at Meharry Medical College, and subsequent to that, I spent some time at Middle Tennessee Mental Health Institute, which is a local state hospital, and after that, we did some locum tenens work, and so we've been called to ministry since 1976, and we've been pastoring. We was acting pastor at Spruce Street Baptist Church for a while, and then pastor of First Community Church. And since that time, we've been working in corrections in Robertson County, Springfield, Tennessee, and we also have a part-time private practice. And more recently, we have been doing some work at a daycare program in Lebanon, Tennessee.
And so, Dr. Poe, your background and your experiences simply lend you to the topic that we're dealing with this morning, dreamers and gun violence. And I, as a matter of fact, earlier we had a show talking about gun violence in Nashville and how prevalent it is among the population. And that's why I'm glad to speak to you in reference to gun violence in Nashville, because I think that you bring a psychological expression in reference to it from your education and your experiences and et cetera. And you can really open it up to us. And let's start off by making some statements in reference to some of the things that has to do with dreamers and gun violence.
Right. Dr. Henry, I would like to start with gun violence, particularly in view of the recent shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. As we speak, the Florida legislature just decided not to take up a bill banning assault rifles. I think it's a credit to the students who survived the shooting that they're at the state capitol. Though some of them were very disappointed that the Florida legislature didn't agree to even take the issue up of banning the AR-15. But let's go back to 1999, the Columbine massacre. These two people committed suicide. Let's also move on to Sandy Hook. Adam Lanza committed suicide. Let's also go on to Cho at Virginia Tech. He committed suicide. Let's also go on to Stephen Paddock, the Las Vegas shooter. He committed suicide. And I believe that Nicholas Cruz would have committed suicide And I want to open it up to a discussion of despair.
Okay, and I tell you what we'll do. We're going to take our first commercial break,
Okay.
and then we'll get into this idea of despair.
Okay.
And we'll be back with our audience.